This is Building Humans, sponsored by Al Mahaba Foundation and Dar El Kalima Publishing.
It's good to be back.
I was looking at the headlines this morning, and it really felt like watching a pendulum that's about to just snap. We're living in this incredibly polarized moment. It feels like the whole world is being forced into two shouting camps. On one side, you've got the My Country First crowd.
Right. Close the borders, build the wall.
Exactly. This retreat into isolationism.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, you have this push for a quote-unquote global system. But let's be honest, for a lot of people, that doesn't feel like cooperation.
It feels like domination.
It feels like losing your identity to some massive faceless machine.
Yeah.
And the pressure on us, on regular people, is that you have to choose. You're either a nationalist or a globalist.
Yeah.
That's it. Pick your side.
It's a false choice. And it's a very dangerous one.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're in Chapter 8 of Education and Peace by Maria Montessori. And I have to say, for someone we think of as a teacher, she comes out swinging, she looks at these two options, and it basically rejects the entire question.
She does more than just reject it. She diagnoses it. And this is the real shift we need to make today. We need to stop thinking of her as just a teacher in a classroom. In this text, she's a social doctor.
Social doctor.
Yes. She's looking at humanity as a patient that is critically, maybe even terminally ill.
Okay, so if humanity is the patient and these political movements are the symptoms,
yeah,
what's the diagnosis?
It's one of the most powerful and, frankly, one of the most confronting metaphors in her entire body of work. She says that asking humanity to choose between fanatical nationalism and imperialist dominance is like asking a dying patient to choose between the plague and cholera.
The plague and cholera. Wow. I mean, that is a distinctly dark diagnosis. Usually you hear about security versus freedom or tradition versus progress.
She calls them fatal diseases.
Does she actually believe they kill the host? I mean, kill society?
She absolutely does. And you have to remember the context. She's watching Europe literally tear itself apart. She sees the plague, that fanatical nationalism, as a kind of necrosis.
Tissue death.
Exactly. When a nation walls itself off, when it retreats into that fortress mentality you mentioned, it thinks it's staying safe. But biologically, it's just cutting off its own blood supply. It's a delusion that a part of the body can survive by cutting itself off from the whole.
So it's a fever of the mind, fear of the other, paranoia.
Precisely. The plague is the delusion that says, I can be healthy even if the rest of the body is rotting.
Which is biologically impossible. I mean, if my leg gets gangrene, my heart is eventually going to stop.
Of course. And now, look at the alternative she gives us, the cholera. This corresponds to that forced globalization, imperialism.
That global system approach.
But specifically, the kind that seeks to dominate. Cholera is an infection that spreads, and it spreads fast. Imperialism is when a powerful nation decides it needs to organize the world by taking it over. It's a disease that devours the weak to feed the strong.
So, we're just stuck.
Yeah.
History just feels like a pendulum swinging between these two disasters. We get sick of the plague, so we swing toward cholera. Then we get sick of being dominated, so we swing right back.
And Montessori is standing right in the middle of it all, in the rubble of the world wars, and she's shouting for us to just stop.
Stop what? Stop choosing.
Stop accepting the choice. A doctor doesn't ask a patient, so would you prefer to die of the Black Death or of severe dehydration?
No.
No. The doctor's job is to choose health. Peace isn't about picking the better disease. It's about finding a state of social health.
Okay, health. I like the sound of that, but it feels a bit abstract, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In the real world, nations have borders, economies compete. How do we just choose health when the entire world is set up for conflict?
That is the million-dollar question. And her answer requires us to completely rethink what the world is today. She argues we aren't living in the world of our ancestors anymore. We've built something new. She calls it supernature.
Supernature. I saw that in the text. It sounds a little sci-fi. What's she getting at?
Well, think about nature, the old world. In nature, survival often did depend on isolation. If my tribe has the fertile valley and you have the Rocky Mountain, I need to keep you out.
Right. Scarcity dictates conflict.
Exactly. In that world, borders made biological sense. But we don't live there anymore. We've built a supernature on top of the natural world. This is the web of technology, of global shipping. The internet international finance.
So the physical reality has changed, which means the rules for survival must have changed too.
The rules have completely inverted. In this supernature, survival depends on access, not isolation. The coal miner in one country keeps the lights on in a hospital in another. A microchip from one continent makes a tractor work on a different one. We are physically, economically, one organism.
So in this reality, borders are what then? Just lines on a map.
They're political hallucinations. They don't really exist in the economic reality of supernature. And because of this, she gives us this really graphic image to explain why war is now obsolete.
What is it?
She writes, and I'm quoting here, "Destroying one nation is tantamount to cutting off one hand in the hope that the other hand will thereby become twice as strong."
That's a horrifying image.
Yeah.
But the logic is clear. If I cut off my left hand, my right hand doesn't get stronger, my whole body goes into shock.
Precisely. And yet, look at modern conflict. We bomb a competitor, destroying their infrastructure, thinking we're winning. But in what she calls a single nation reality, there is no such thing as winning a war.
It destroys the myth of the victor.
Completely. If you are in a sealed room with your neighbor and you release poison gas to kill him, you're poisoning the air you have to breathe. The interdependence of this supernature makes war suicidal. It's not just immoral anymore, it's stupid. It's an act of self-mutilation.
Okay, hold on. I want to push back on this a bit.
Right.
Because if this is all true, if we are physically and economically one single nation, then why doesn't it feel like it? Why are we still shouting at each other? Why does that person across the ocean feel like a stranger or even an enemy instead of my own left hand?
That is the absolute crux of the problem. We've updated our hardware, but we're still running ancient software. Montessori calls this condition moral schizophrenia.
Moral schizophrenia.
Yes, we are living in a modern supernature, but we are reacting with primitive, tribal emotions. Our hands are operating global networks, but our hearts are still reacting like we're protecting a cave from a rival tribe.
So we're connected, but we don't feel the connection. We can't see the web.
We're blind to it. And this is where she tries to cure our vision. To help us see the single nation, she uses these two beautiful metaphors. She talks about the miner and the baker.
Okay, let's dig into those. Start with the miner.
She asks us to really visualize a coal miner. Picture this man. He goes down into the dark, into the bowels of the earth every single day. The air is thick. He faces the constant risk of explosions, of cave-ins, of being buried alive.
And if you ask him why he does it, he'll say, I need a paycheck.
He will. But Montessori asks us to look past his motive to the result of his labor. Does he dig all that coal just to heat his own little house?
No, of course not. It's mountains of coal.
Exactly. He is extracting energy for millions of people he will never, ever meet. He's warming homes in cities he'll never visit. Whether he knows it or not, he is a hero of the everyday. He is sacrificing his own health for the collective comfort of this single nation.
He's a martyr for a society that doesn't even know his name.
He is. And then she gives us the baker. While the world is sleeping, the baker is awake, working in the heat. And again, he doesn't bake 500 loaves of bread just for his own family. He's feeding the whole community.
It's interesting because we usually frame this as just commerce. He does it for profit, the miner for a wage, but she's reframing it entirely as service.
She calls it the cosmic task. And through this, she introduces this idea of gratitude to the unknown. Society isn't a jungle of competition, which is what the plague versus cholera mindset tells us. It's actually a web of silent sacrifices. We couldn't get through one day without the labor of thousands of strangers.
So we're already living this universal accord. We just lack the consciousness to see it.
That's the moral schizophrenia. We are living in a state of absolute physical cooperation, but we deny it spiritually.
Okay, so the diagnosis is that we're stuck choosing between these two diseases. The reality is that we're one nation, but we're too mentally ill to see it. So what's the cure? Because honestly, looking at the adults running the world, I don't see them having this epiphany. They seem pretty stuck in that plague versus cholera debate.
And Montessori would agree with you. She was profoundly skeptical that adults could lead this change on their own. She looked at her generation, the generation of 2 world wars, and saw them as too ossified.
Ossified, like hardened bone.
Exactly. Our prejudices are set. You can't just teach an old nationalist to suddenly love the global other. It's too late. So she points to a third way.
The third way.
And it isn't a new political party. It's not a treaty. It's the Child Messiah.
The Child Messiah. That is a very heavy, very spiritual title. Is she being religious here, or is this still part of the social diagnosis?
It's both. But she grounds it in biology. She also calls the child the forgotten citizen. And
Mhm.
think about it. The child is the only truly neutral being in the human race.
Neutral how?
Well, a newborn has no political party. They have no racial prejudice. They don't even have a language yet. They are a blank slate. But more than that, they're a unifier. You put a French baby and a German baby together in a room, they don't fight over old territories. They play. The child is the canvas upon which what she calls the science of peace must be written.
But wait, usually we think of children as empty vessels that we have to fill. We think it's our job to teach them our politics, our history, our biases.
And that is exactly how we infect them. That's how we pass on the plague and the cholera. We take this neutral, loving being and we force them into our rigid adult boxes. Montessori argues we need to stop. We need to treat the child as a spiritual embryo.
A spiritual embryo, meaning it has its own internal pattern of development that we're messing with.
Precisely. Just as a physical embryo has a blueprint to grow a body, the spiritual embryo has a blueprint to grow a personality that prefers cooperation. Humans are social animals. We aren't born hating each other. We are taught to hate. If we stop repressing the child and allow them to develop into what she calls a whole man, balancing their hands and their mind, we create a human who naturally prefers peace.
The whole man. That implies that we, the adults, are not whole.
She calls us mutilated men.
Ouch. Mutilated men. That is a harsh critique.
It is, but look at our education system. We produce intellectuals who can theorize about peace but can't build a table. They're detached from reality. Or we produce workers who can follow orders but lack the critical thinking to question a war. These are fragmented people, and fragmented, mutilated people are easily led. They're the ones who run to the plague or the cholera because they feel incomplete.
So the whole man, the child who's allowed to develop freely, is the only one strong enough to handle the reality of the single nation.
That's it. The universal accord she dreams of isn't signed by men in suits. It's built in the nursery. It's built in the classroom where competition is replaced by cooperation.
It all comes back to the idea that peace isn't just the absence of war. It's the presence of a different kind of human being.
That is the core of it. You can't build a healthy society with sick cells. And right now, we are mass-producing sick cells. The forgotten citizen, the child, is our only chance to reset.
It's incredible to think about. We spend billions on defense, endless hours debating policy, and Montessori's pointing at a toddler and saying, there is your solution.
Look at the toddler. That is where the single nation actually begins. If we want a world that works, we have to stop trying to fix the broken adults and start protecting the new life that hasn't been broken yet.
So let's bring this all home. We've covered a lot, from the plague and cholera of politics to the reality of supernature, and finally, the child messiah. What does this mean for us right now?
It means we have to stop accepting the false choice. When you turn on the news and hear people screaming that we must choose between isolation or domination, you have to reject the premise. You have to start by recognizing that we are already living in the single nation.
We have to see the web that we're a part of.
Yes. Next time you buy a coffee, think of the farmer, think of the shipper, the roaster. Cultivate that gratitude to the unknown. That is how you start to cure your own moral schizophrenia.
And most importantly, look at the forgotten citizen.
The universal accord starts with the child. We must build in our hearts a ministry of childhood. We have to protect that builder of peace. If we want a world that doesn't just swing from disaster to disaster, we have to stop infecting the next generation with our old diseases.
That is a powerful, powerful place to land. It's not about changing the government. It's about changing how we view the smallest members of our society.
It's the only way to build humans who are actually capable of peace.
If you want to dive deeper into this blueprint, and believe me, we have only scratched the surface today, you need to read the source yourself. You can find Education and Peace from Dar el Kalima Publishing. It's truly a manual for the future.
It is indeed.
Thank you, Doctor, for walking us through this. It's given me a lot to think about, especially regarding my own moral schizophrenia.
It's a lifelong cure. My pleasure.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive. Remember the motto that guides us: love for all, service for everyone.